Hey, what's up everyone? My name is Angela. I'm also called Think Blue 45 online, but I'm being quiet just because my partner is sleeping inside the house, and so I don't want to disturb her. I did want to comment on the whole Colleen Ballinger stuff because I can completely understand how she got to this point. Let me explain that, and before I even start, her behavior, her actions, what she's doing now, what she did in the past, there's no excuse for it. I'm about to talk about kind of like trauma, childhood trauma, that sort of stuff. It doesn't excuse it. It doesn't excuse actions. Trauma, sorry, a cat wants to come out, but people get traumatized, right? But it doesn't mean it gives them then the right to traumatize others. There's no excuse. You could say, but I went through. No excuse. And my heart aches for you guys who sustain so much trauma and abuse from her, because that's, I can't imagine. I can really only empathize. I can't imagine how that trauma felt, and now how it's unfolding with her inauthenticity and her own crap, right? My heart goes out to you guys in your healing, and I guess I kind of do just want to say, whatever the hell Colleen, whatever the hell she's doing, you are all incredibly valid and beautiful human beings who sustained a lot of trauma from this person and deserve to have a voice to say it, and also deserve the space to heal. That's awful. Before I get too much into it, I will say trigger warning. I'm going to talk about just, the path kind of from childhood to this point, how, trauma kind of, in my thoughts and my opinions and beliefs, right? So this is from my view of what I think kind of happens sometimes with trauma, or just kind of what I think her story generally was that led her to this. And it's wild when you actually start thinking about it. So just a trigger warning. All right, so we all know that Colleen is notorious for posting videos of her venting, crying, like hyperventilating, sobbing, all of it, talking about her different issues in her life, or where she's struggling to express herself, or where something isn't, her life is extremely hard, and she vents and looks for advice a lot. And I mean, we've seen that. I feel like Colleen, throughout her entire life, I feel like what led to Colleen to where she is today is because she sustained extreme childhood trauma, because we all have that inner child that is traumatized inside us, right? I think Colleen was extremely traumatized by, extremely strict Christian parents. And I before I say the rest of this, I will say everyone has their own life path, own perspective, and own set of trauma, right? So I'm focusing on Colleen, but we can also look at the parents and what their generational trauma was, what was happening with them, right? Or what was happening with the siblings' perspective. Those are all valid. I'm just talking about her, but I don't want to disregard or say, these are awful people, because no, they were traumatized, passing trauma down. But I think when you look at the reading she has of her childhood journals, I think that says a lot, because that stuff is very it seems like she almost had trigger warning. I feel like she's always had some form of SI, or just being very I don't want to, it's hard talking about these topics. Again, trigger warning, about to talk about, not wanting to exist. I think that is explanation enough, but I'm going to use some really, could be triggering words, right? And I want you guys all to be safe and okay. It seemed like for a while, how she was raised and then going into high school and college, that those journals she used to write as a young girl is why that shows suicidal ideation / just being suicidal. Like that's a depression where you just don't want to exist anymore. And we've heard on her content that she was extremely mean to Rachel in the beginning. So, that was a big behavior that was showing that she was hurting as a child that the parents didn't pick up on. So it just got reinforced. And going through those mental struggles, I feel like she probably didn't express it to her parents or tried in the beginning. And because they were so strict and Christian, they probably didn't listen. And so she acted out. But then she learned, okay, if I express myself, I don't get any, no one listens, I feel like she developed this feeling of just being an awful human, of being invalid, of being, just, I think also what affected her growing up too were she had a bunch of, I think, insecurities about herself that developed in her home that she took with her everywhere. And I think there was some bullying maybe in school. I think she's talked about that actually, that, that along with how she's being raised, also in like a Christian home, she probably had so many judgments about herself with, the culture of school, with where she went and the culture of her college, etc., etc. I mean, I feel like she had a lot of things she didn't express and learned not to express them because they don't matter and aren't valid anyway throughout childhood. And then those journals were where she could express herself and tell the truth. It was her private space. But those are scary to hear her read, because that sounds like a kid desperate for help. My cat put off a cricket toy. And then, fast forward to college. This is when she makes Miranda. I think Miranda is the product of her own insecurities and thoughts on herself. And I think Miranda is an extremely judgmental character, which I think is just a projection of how judgmental she is. I think the content of Miranda and it being so just gross and just not tailoring well to kids and not even to adults. The inappropriate jokes for the age range, we all know. I think that is, again, her judgmental side coming out. It was all created off of, her own insecurities, her own judgment of herself, feelings of herself. And she probably, in musical theater school saw all of these other people and envied their position and were judgmental towards them. But it was only because she felt like her skill was useless, was awful, was invalid. So she saw others who were, confident people. She, Colleen lacked confidence at all, but saw these confident people. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there were also mean girls, etc., etc. I hear you on that. But also she had her own judgments about them. And then because she doesn't understand how to express herself, she makes a character Miranda. So she can be another person and say these things. But I think it's also her way of not learning through childhood, learning that expressing yourself goes nowhere, is ignored, not heard, and learning to bottle up feelings and thoughts and beliefs and stress inside, that she created a character that is just a complete projection of herself. But it almost just feels like she's making fun of herself. It's so weird, but clearly that's where it comes from, trauma. And then she carried it way too long. But I think she's carrying it so far is because she still doesn't know how to express herself authentically. That's why she has those breakdowns in the videos, why she, mental breakdowns, emotional breakdowns, how, life events and stress really collapse her, like she is not well. She's not well. She didn't learn how to express herself, and she probably grew up in a very, just think about it, like a strict Christian environment as a young girl. And, when we're just growing up, we don't know. We're meant to learn from our parents. They're supposed to be mentors, teachers for us to help us grow. I don't feel like that was the household. I feel like there's something off about her entire family. I mean, look at how, Colleen's siblings are living too. Like, they're all online. I mean, there's exploitation. It's just the entire family. The entire, the kids are all expressing themselves in inappropriate ways because they haven't learned how to express themselves because of childhood trauma and reinforcement in childhood, And I think that's why she expresses and was extremely inappropriate and manipulative and abusive, because she herself had so many insecurities, so many beliefs, negative beliefs about herself, negative thoughts about herself, judging herself the most. And I think that's now why it trickles in here and keeps getting worse, is because, number one, she's spiraling. She really is having probably like mental breakdowns multiple times a day, I think, at least. And I don't think she can take ability right now, because to take ability would be to be vulnerable and being able to look at her awful choices and being like, hey, you're right, I did do these things. I did it full force. And go on to her own, the rest of it. But, that would have her have to stand, look at herself in the mirror and see those flaws and not judge herself for having it's that whole thing. And she hasn't learned how to express herself. Well, she had learned to express it in inappropriate ways, because in childhood she didn't learn how to express herself because it probably wasn't heard, wasn't received in the intensity it needed to be received, was not heard. Probably there was a lot of, I feel like, yelling or just things being loud and intense. And yeah, and I mean, anyway. But that's why now she struggles with being vulnerable. She struggles being authentic. She struggles being herself, which I'm sure is, kind of nothing what all of this is. But she probably is judging the hell out of herself. And she doesn't take, I guess, probably judgment or criticism well, because she is the largest critic, judgmental person to herself. She probably knows what happened, that there is evidence that there is this, but she can't admit it yet to herself because she can't look in the mirror with all of her traumas and insecurities and stuff going on. You know what I mean? Like, it's wild, and it all is linked to trauma. It's all linked to trauma. And I will add on to this that I do not think trauma excuses anything like behavior, actions, thoughts, everything. I do not think at all that trauma is an excuse. It's not an excuse. It's a perspective of understanding how it is right now. And I feel like I want to post this because I don't know if it would give anyone a peace of mind to look at it from a trauma perspective. I don't know. And that's completely valid if it doesn't at all. And I apologize to anyone if this was triggering or, that if it was hard for you to hear, it's upset you. I feel like watching Colleen's content was like watching someone screaming for help and attention, but not attention and, oh my gosh, I need to be, but the attention she wanted from her parents, the attention she needed but never got, the attention that was clearly showing itself that she needed and wasn't given it. Now she wants all the attention from fans and this, that. It's like, duh, right? Childhood trauma, man. A lot of traumas. I feel like, I'm gonna just say, a lot of trauma, I think, stems from your childhood that gets reinforced and cultivated, especially your thoughts and beliefs about yourself over time, and whatever home you were brought up in and whatever trauma you sustained there completely bleeds in to when you're like an adult, when you're supposed to go off into the world, and then is when stuff really starts to hit the fan, because we don't you don't know how to express this or do this because you weren't taught it, or just a lot of trauma. I have so much heart pain for the victims in this. I also have a lot of heart pain for Colleen. I do not support her, really anymore. I think it's because my heart can see every perspective, or I try to, in a really, objective way. I'm kind of also coming more into my spirituality, and it's so clear just how much whatever was going on in her childhood with her family at the time completely imploded her. And then she was just her inner child is literally just traumatized, scared as hell, crapping on themselves constantly, like in a fetal position, sobbing, having panic attacks and anxiety attacks from everything. I mean, undiagnosed mental illnesses that we found out too. I mean, undiagnosed, right? So who knows what thoughts and feelings and beliefs around that she developed because of not getting it treated and, again, not being seen. And I have no idea how her I think her parents were probably a bit scary. And that would also make sense to how it would impact her, Colleen, as a young girl, as a child, and how that would bleed into now, because we all saw also that high video with her playing the ukulele. Like, that was bonkers. That was so out of touch. That was so it was so jolting. It was so, like, wait, this is real. What she's actually doing it this way. And that's because I think she doesn't know how to express herself. She doesn't know how to be vulnerable. She doesn't think she'll be heard this. And it, again, like the judgment, the whatever did it train. Yeah, I don't know, and nor do I care, but I can't even remember that line. Like, that's how much I watched it and just was like, no. I can kind of hear it now again, but anyway, I mean, that's all judgment against her. I think she, knows what's going on and doesn't know how to express herself or be vulnerable, and does it in the most complete inappropriate way. And my guess is, I feel like she judged herself for her acting ability, musical theater ability, voice, was so insecure about that. And I think that, I think she has a real insecurity with that talent. And I think for her, like, singing and songwriting, I think is a method of her way to, express herself creatively, like making creative lyrics, making creative ditties, I think that's a healing process for her, and I think that's why she chose to come on to sing and play the ukulele, because that is where she's able to express herself more clearly. And obviously what she expressed was completely out of touch. I mean, it really does look like she mentally is on a extreme downward spiral to somewhere extremely destructive. And I'm sure, I think, probably Eric too is working overtime to keep her afloat, and then their kids, and I mean, I really think too that their kids are experiencing a lot as well, and it's just it's also so sad to see the victims, and also to see another human, Colleen, just completely getting annihilated. But I think that's her lesson to learn here, is this is what happens when you aren't expressing yourself authentically, aren't validating others, aren't taking accountability, aren't being honest, aren't accepting what has happened, and for the reality of it. And not only that, accepting the fact that there are apologies needed, like there are things needed to help heal this, what's been broken. Like, she's got to see herself in that negative light and be like, wow, I was that abusive, manipulative groomer. And it would take a lot. It would take her having to see the judgmentalism in herself too, and to finally just be like, all I can do is work professionally to unlearn whatever habits, beliefs, thoughts are causing me to make these parasocial relationships. I mean, that in itself says that she was extremely lonely. She had no friends. I remember her talking about that about school too. Like, she didn't have friends. Corey was, one of the best friends she ever met. Like, she was very lonely growing up, I feel like. And so with that, of course, she would then because she doesn't know and has learned to express herself inappropriately, then inappropriately made those parasocial relationships with kids. And she herself got completely lost in a downward spiral with it, because she didn't know. She was so desperate to not be lonely, so desperate to have connection, that she made inappropriate, destructive, traumatizing, parasocial bonds with her fans. And all the attentions her fans were giving her was validating, because that's what her inner child wants. But it's more so just she's screaming for help and wanting someone to see it. And it hurts my heart for the victims, and my heart does hurt for her, because I deal with my own mental illnesses, and it really looks like she's unwell. And another trigger warning about body, trigger warning, you know, look, you know, her body checks out. Her body does not look physically healthy at all. And that in itself is hard to see. And I know people can actually be thin, they can be in the middle, they can be on an extreme, right? They can be. And I do believe that she probably has struggled with maybe appetite or fast metabolism, something like that, and probably judges her body the most. It's scary though. Her downward spiral might lead to a ending of, you know, her not being around anymore. Her, you know, that's really what it looks like to me. And that does not mean, oh, let's give her fault, you know, no. She needs to learn this lesson. She needs to lose everything in order to gain something again. Like, she needs to lose this. She needs to realize that, I think she needs to realize that, okay, I need to take a step back from all of this. I need to stop YouTube for a while. I need to go get professional help. Even go into a freaking program, mental illness program, mental health program, or if she's really in crisis, right, go to the hospital and then spend time in the hospital. Because I think she needs to start her own healing journey in order to actually learn anything and maybe be somewhat of an authentic person in the future. But I think she's mentally so, you know, where she's at, that I don't think anything that's authentic is gonna come right now. I think she's gonna lose everything, lose her reputation. But I think she needs to go through that devastating, like probably life-shattering event, because only then will she then be triggered into self-reflection and on a path to self-love and on a path to authenticity, and then on a path of taking accountability for real. It's I mean, I guess that's kind of it. I might have other thoughts, but I can't fully remember them, or, you know, but that's my overall thought on this. And I think it's just more so a good presentation of what not healing our inner child really does come to, or what the outcomes are of not healing our inner child. And not only that, how much when we are a child, so many things can, you know, you come in new, right? As a kid, you come in new, blank, you know, you're meant to be mentored about life, supported through your own expression as a human being, and teach them how to live in this world the way that they are, right? And when we don't get that, and there is instability, it leads to instability in the future. It leads to trauma in the future, because we're traumatized in childhood. It never gets noticed or seen. So then we create trauma in the future, or go through traumatizing things. It's just so linked to the inner child / when you were a child growing up, or the home you grew up in, and the people you grew up in and around, the environment you grew up in. So much happens in childhood, and we all know inner child. I can't even imagine, again, the victims of this on that scale. And I just know Colleen's inner child is probably barely breathing at the moment, with how much she's repressed and expressed inappropriately and manipulated and abused. And yeah, I don't know, I think maybe her parents could have talked to her in a very inappropriate manner and made weird jokes, and she received that, and that was cultivated, and so that's how she got also into the parasocial relationships. But I think it was also more so just a inner longing and desire for connection and attention, and that's how it was projected. And that's awful. That's awful. Yeah, I'm gonna stop there. This was 30 minutes. If anyone actually watched this, thank you. I wanted to make this video because I saw a handout of somebody who was like victimizing and doing this and then apology and different things, and it was just explaining how each lyric was clearly like either she was blaming others or victimizing or minimizing stuff, and there was no apology at all. And you know, she played the victim in the situation that and that just goes to show is she feels like a victim of the world. But that is so opposite. She's not, but she still has that mentality. Again, she can't be authentic if she feels like a victim. She's blaming others because she's not ready to look in the mirror and take accountability for herself. And again, like, even if she did come out, I feel like it would go a long way, especially if she came out with an authentic video and then said, all right, now I'm leaving the internet. Like, you know, and just said, I realize now, blank, I'm going to take time away and not be online anymore. But I don't know. Her life right now, her path through life is getting a little scary. It's getting really scary. I mean, especially with her Colleen Vlogs channel. I mean, that was just showing destruction after destruction. Mentally and just physically, and like you could see life was taking a toll, and I feel like she just repressed it a lot, especially to kids, Eric, everyone. And then inappropriately expressed it everywhere. You know, it's like... And then so many people get burned and traumatized and manipulated and abused because somebody else was traumatized, manipulated, and abused and talking. I mean... But I guess I'll call this video there. My heart really goes out to the victims. You deserve validation and you deserve healing, and all your stories and experiences are so valid and so, I can't even imagine, rough and yeah, traumatizing and panic attack inducing and anxiety attack Again, I'll just repeat this. Trauma does not excuse actions or behaviors. Trauma doesn't excuse being a horrible person. You know, it doesn't excuse that. It doesn't excuse the manipulation, the grooming, the abuse. It doesn't excuse any of it. It doesn't excuse it. It's only an explanation, but it does not excuse it. And it's time for a mid-30-year-old adult woman to take herself away. Stop. And really do some self-healing, because right now she is just traumatizing people day after day. It feels like every day feels like just victims are more traumatized, and that all of this stuff is being brought up. I mean, trauma does not excuse any of it. Maybe understanding the perspective, though, can help healing. I don't know. It has helped me heal some trauma, which is probably why I'm also releasing this, because being able to see the perspective, I can see, oh, it wasn't intentionally done to me because of this. That person was traumatized. That person wasn't even in their brain. But it doesn't excuse the trauma that you endured, and your voices are more than valid, and this needs to be said. This needs to be brought up. Like, like, this has to happen. There have to be consequences. What she did was so out of touch, abuse, manipulation. I mean, it just awful. And it's hard, you know, looking up to someone and their family, and, you know, even just as a viewer, from since she, you know, started Miranda with the singing lesson and was doing the Michael Jackson. And I mean, I did a parody, I think, on Facebook or something of me doing Miranda, and, you know, I ended up going to one of her shows and meet and greet, and I think I went to a second one too. Didn't do the meet and greet, but made them a like a dinosaur onesie for Flynn when he was young, and it was pterodactyl. Well, no, there was a baby pterodactyl in pink and in clouds on the front, and sorry, my cats are like being punky. There was that on the front. It was a gray onesie, and then you flipped it over, and it was pterodactyls fly in Jurassic skies, swim, 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 Jurassic Park. You know, and it just, looking back on it, seeing all this, it was so inauthentic, so fake, and it's hard just being a viewer of someone for that long. Like, what was it, 2008/2009? Now it's 2023, like, of looking up to someone and then seeing this hell, like, yeah. But I'll leave it there. I love you guys. I love you guys. My heart, any love I can send out to everyone, I send out unconditional love to you guys. You guys deserve all the love from the, regardless of whether AB happened. You guys all deserve all the love, all the time. And I'm so sorry you guys have and had to and have to deal with this, to have to manage, to have to think about it, feel it. My heart truly, truly goes out to you guys. All right. Thanks for listening.